Welcome to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society, whose mission is creating unity through music, or as I often like to say, making connections through music with the intention of bringing peace. And we're here today in Studio 1 of the worldwide headquarters of the Planetary Gig Society. Very, very pleased that today, great friend, great musician, great all-around guy, Mr. Rick Franklin is here to talk with us. Hey, Rick, thanks very
Jeff,
much.
How you doing, man?
Yeah, it's so nice for you to be here and take the time. I think we were just chatting a little bit earlier, and I think we met at the Barbershop, Archie Edwards Blues Heritage Foundation, and it could have been going on 20 years ago.
It definitely was probably on a Saturday because that's when things happen there.
Yeah.
Especially music.
Yeah. Saturday at the Barbershop. Yeah. We've narrowed it down. It could, been 1998 or 99. And one of the things we do want to touch on today is we're coming up to the 20th anniversary of the Archie Edwards Blues Heritage Foundation. It was formed in 1998 after Archie had passed. And it's had a remarkable history and effect, and quite a community has developed from it. It's not at the original Barbershop anymore, more like it was, but out in Riverdale. But I want to ask you about that. But first, just because I'm always interested, and I don't know, when did music come into your life? Was there a lot of music in your family? Did your parents play? Did you pick up a guitar when you were 3? Did you start with some other? What do you remember about music when you were younger, and why you started playing?
I always remember music being an integral part of our household. My father was in the Air Force, and when I was born, and I'm the oldest of 3, and as a result of that, we moved around every so many years, mm-hmm. and there was always music when I was growing up. He had an assignment in England for 4 years, right before I started middle school, and because of the difference in the power, voltage-wise, we didn't have a TV for 4 years. So,
oh my God, as a kid, and you didn't have TV for 4 years?
Didn't have a TV, but I listened to the BBC a lot.
Huh.
And I listened to a lot of music as a result of that, and listening to the radio, Elvis and all of those guys and everything that was happening around that time.
Mm-hmm.
And when we came back off of that tour, he got stationed in California. And then I was really in middle school, and I started playing the trumpet.
The trumpet?
Yep.
Uh-huh.
In the meantime, he ended up, as a result of our stay over in England, he ended up getting a nice stereo system.
Mm-hmm.
He bought a Telefunken.
A Telefunken?
Yes. And it was and that's what we primarily listened to records at a turntable. It had AM, FM, and shortwave, all in the box. And I think he still has that unit.
Wow.
In his house.
Wow.
I don't know if it's functioning or anything, but it's still in his house. Cabinet was really nice, mm-hmm. that it was in. So we always listened to, we had Ray Charles and Dinah Washington, and he liked all of those people.
Yeah, did he play music?
No, he didn't play music.
Or your mom? Or
no, my mom didn't either. So then I started playing the trumpet in middle school. And one of my main influences back then was a South African guy named Hugh Masekela.
Oh, yeah.
And he would do I really liked his technique. He would do some double tonguing, like da 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 da
Oh
da.
yeah, yeah,
So I
yeah.
tried to do that, and I got okay at it. And then we moved again, and came to this area in the middle of my sophomore year
In the DC
in high
area.
school. Yeah, he got stationed over at Andrews Air Force Base.
Uh-huh.
And so we came back to the DC area. My grandmother lived in Dumfries. His whole side of the family was in the area.
Mm-hmm.
My mom's side of the family was down in Mount Olive, North Carolina, where they make the pickles. They have a pickle plant there. And so I stopped playing the trumpet and I started playing harmonica.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So that's why when I've seen you recently play, you're pretty doggone good.
Yeah, so I played harmonica for a long time. I actually
Really?
played in bands in high school.
Really?
Played harmonica and sang.
Did you have to read some kind of music to play harmonica?
This was rock bands.
Oh, yeah,
I was
yeah.
listening to Paul Butterfield blues band
Oh
back then.
yeah.
I didn't know anything about Muddy Waters. I didn't know anything about those earlier cats. All I knew is that the Chicago thing was happening, and Paul Butterfield and was leading the show as far as I was concerned.
Yeah.
East West and some of those a couple first two albums. But I found shortly that some of the bandmates weren't as reliable as I was, and ended up at a function or two with just the harmonica, and
That's hard.
and that was hard. That was hard.
I know from experience.
I decided then, and that was right around the time of Jimi Hendrix, Eric Clapton, all those guys, that I'd take up guitar. So I actually, I guess because I was already involved in music and reading music.
So you could read music.
And listening to
Yeah.
music. I had a pretty good ear. And one of my neighbors, a good friend of mine named Mark Lee, was already a really good guitar player at sophomore year in high school, which is down in Garfield. I went to Garfield High School.
Yeah.
And so he showed me a few things, and from there I started, playing rhythm guitar, and then I learned leads, pentatonic scales, different scales, and stuff like that, and was able to get a good feel for at least playing blues back then. And it's like reminded me of a joke that I heard. The difference between a jazz guitarist and a blues guitarist. The difference between that is that a jazz guitarist knows about 150, 200 chords that he plays in front of three people. A blues guitarist knows three chords that he plays in front of 150 to 200 people.
So,
But I learned, I started studying some jazz guitar, and basically I got tired of hauling around the equipment. And so I kind of abandoned that, and after my senior year in high school, my freshman year in college, I played in college band. We had a band that we played fraternity parties and things like that. Yeah.
Wow.
We were doing Stones, Rolling Stones.
Wow.
We were doing Neil Young. We were doing any of that party stuff. Yeah. And this was at Madison JMU when it was just Madison. And after that, I really got tired of hauling around the equipment. So I came back to Virginia and started taking classes at Northern Virginia Community College, electronics technology, and I started taking classical guitar classes because they offered classical.
wow.
And that's where I learned the classical guitar technique, with your thumb and your three fingers. And in that class, there was another guy that I met that said, "Hey, you ever heard of a guy named Blind Blake?" And I go, "No, I never heard of him." "How about Reverend Gary Davis?" And I go, "No, never heard of him."
Mm.
"How about Mississippi John Hurt?" No, I don't know who you're talking about, man. And he says, "Well, they do this kind of style, you know." And I go, "Oh, wow, that's pretty neat." And one day I was over at the local music store at the time was Giant Music, and I was over there when one of my friends was working there, and he said, "I got one of my buddies has this box of albums and books, and he really needs some money really bad. You think you might be interested in it?" And I said, "Well, man, I only got $40 on me right now." And he says, "Well, let me call him up and see if he'll take it." And so he called him up, and sure enough, the guy says, "Yeah, I'll take it." So I get this box of stuff, and I'm going through it, and here is all some Yazoo records.
Uh-huh.
Yazoo was one of the primary record companies that took 78s of Blind Blake, Mississippi John Hurt, and converted them to vinyl, to 33s, with the famous cover art of R. Crumb, the underground comic guy. And he also had a couple of books by Stephen Grossman that had tablature in it. So I had never been exposed to tablature before, but I saw, oh, okay, so here's some tablature. And so I was able to learn some of that stuff, learn the picking patterns and things like that. And this was all the same time that I decided, that I went to my first Smithsonian Folk Festival at this time, and I saw Martin Bogan and Armstrong and cats like that back at the time that were doing the Smithsonian circuit. And I also went to the Washington Folk Festival at Glen Echo, down the street from where the studio number 1 is. And that same afternoon, I saw Archie Edwards on one stage.
Whoa.
And I saw John Jackson on another stage.
No way.
And I'm thinking, whoa. And then I got to talking to him, and found out that Archie was over and had a barbershop over there by Catholic University. And John Jackson, I was living in Arlington at the time, and John Jackson lived down the road there over Falls.
So what year was that about?
It was about 1978, 79.
Wow.
And found out that John Jackson didn't live too far from me, literally, out in the country. And it was interesting because he was both of them were so nice. And I think at the time there wasn't too many young black guys that were really into what they were doing. And they kind of recognized that I was pretty enthusiastic about it. And that, I had already had some finger picking skills at that time. And it was just a matter of, learning the material and talking to both of them on a fairly regular basis. It got to the point to where the three of us did some shows together.
Really?
Northern Virginia Community College. I had one of the professors over there taught Black History, was coordinator for Black History Month, and I had taken one of his classes and did a presentation that included some music, finger picking, and ended up doing a couple of shows there with Archie and John Jackson, sponsored by the DC Blues Society at the time, because I've been involved with them also at the same time when they first started. And so, one thing led to another, and I'd see Archie on a fairly regular basis. I'd see John. We'd go out to his place.
He was one of the nicest men I've ever come across in my life.
Yeah, he was a real gentleman. For a gravedigger.
Yeah. So did you go to Archie's Barbershop on
Saturdays?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I did.
I mean, did you go to get your hair cut ever?
He only cut my hair once.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, this is a story that I've only told maybe once or twice, but I sat in the barber chair, and it was probably that one chair that's in the barbershop now.
Uh-huh.
And he cut, I said, Archie, can you give me a haircut? And he goes, yeah, sure. Archie starts cutting my hair, and something's wrong with his clippers. They keep shocking me. I keep feeling a shock every time he got too near my ear or something like that. And back in the day, when you had like an old amplifier and you plugged it in and it was not grounded properly and it made a noise, you just unplugged it, turned the plug over, and plugged it in the other way, and that usually took care of it, took care of the grounding. So I said, Archie, why don't you just take your clippers and reverse them, man? That might. And he said, boy, you just sit still. And so he finished to me, and I'm twitching and everything, and I said, well, nah, I ain't gonna get another haircut from him. We'll just play music and going to see what he's got in the refrigerator in the back room there.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's a great story.
Yeah.
One thing maybe you could comment on, because I learned so much myself going to the barbershop. Miles Spicer told me about it, maybe 1997. And one of the things was just hanging out. I mean, I was trying to learn harmonica, so I was always, God, what key are we in? And when my lead comes around, and what's this song? But I began to realize that it seemed like what was really important was not that so much. It was just hanging out. And I also remember hearing, the black guys would get their hair cut like every week or two maybe, and us white guys would get them cut, like I get my hair cut like 6 weeks or 8 weeks or something. But what that meant was there was a real community around the barbershop. And I guess that's one of the things that Archie had down there.
He definitely did. It was a community. It was a safe space where a group of black men could hang out and not feel threatened. Some of these guys Archie grew up with, they were friends of his, and they were musicians also. Some of them not nowhere near as good as Archie, but it was a sense of a place where you could hang out and you could be yourself. They kind of like tried to portray that in the movie The Barbershop, which was released, a number of years back, in Barbershop 2, try to show that whole sense of community right there. And Archie did have that in the neighborhood, where the neighborhood, I'm not sure where everybody came from, if they all lived in the Bunker Hill Road neighborhood, but, they would come through. They would always come through and have conversations and tell jokes and talk about the lousy football team.
Still do that. So people say, well, Archie on Saturday afternoons at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, he'd say, ain't cutting no more hair, and pull out the whiskey bottles and start playing some music. Is that the way that it was, or how did it?
He stopped cutting hair around 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock.
Yeah. And it would go till maybe 5 to 6 at the most.
And that was pretty routine, like a lot, most Saturdays?
Most Saturdays he would do that, unless he was playing somewhere.
Yeah.
And he started getting some gigs, and some recognition outside the DC area.
And who do you remember playing down there in the kind of those days? Anybody? I mean, old Joe used to show up. Mr. Bones was there. Mr. O'Neill. Mr.
Bones was there. I love, like I said, back then I had some pretty good skills at that point, and it was just a thrill for me to play a song and have Mr. Bones playing along with it.
Wow.
And it's like, wow.
Wow.
Truthfully. It was pretty. Yeah, it was pretty amazing for me. Almost amazing as the time I was in the library in Arlington off of Quincy Street, and I'm looking for some blues music, looking through some blues books to see, what they had in there other than the books that I had gotten when I bought the crate of stuff. And I'm going through one of the books, and it talks about blues musicians and who's who. And I turned to a page, and there's a picture of John Jackson. They almost threw me out of the library because I just went crazy. I said, "What?" I had no idea that he had played for the Queen of England. I had no idea that he'd been all over the planet. This is even before I knew about John Cephas and Phil Wiggins. And here's John Jackson, man, getting all of this documentation on him.
Wow. So if you met up with Archie in the late 70s, I guess you must have been sort of semi-regular or whatever at the barbershop for 20 years, maybe?
Yeah, I would go fairly often. I wouldn't go every Saturday.
Yeah.
But I would go periodically. At that time, I was doing stuff with the DC Blues Society also, and so there was a lot of overlap. Some co-sponsorship of events and stuff like that. We had a fundraiser or two in the barbershop while Archie was still alive, with the DC Blues Society.
And did you meet John Cephas and Phil Wiggins through Archie in that connection? Or?
I met them through the DC Blues Society.
Uh-huh.
They were, that photo of us in front of the barbershop,
I love that photo.
Was the start of the DC Blues Society, whose first president was John Cephas and Barry Lee Pearson were all involved in that. And my friend Michael Roach ended up being like the second president or something like that in the organization. But Archie and John Jackson were also involved, as part of the inaugural group of people that performed. I think all of those people in that photograph played at the inaugural DC Blues Society concert that they had over at a church over there off of F Street downtown.
Wow, like what year was that?
It was 1987.
Well,
and it was May 22nd because that's the night that my youngest daughter was born.
Wow. Congratulations.
So I went from the hospital to the concert.
Nice. That sounds like a good thing to do. I love that picture because, Eleanor Ellis was in the picture. Mark Winter. Plays with the Nighthawks.
Yeah.
Phil, John Jackson, yourself.
Yep. Neil Harp. Did you say Flora already? Flora Moulton?
No, Flora.
Flora's in the picture. Ben Andrews. And a couple other people whose name slips me.
Yeah, we'd have to get that picture out.
Yeah.
I love that picture. So I do remember you, I think the first time, or one of the first times I remember seeing you play, you were playing with Neil Harp.
And Rick Usselton.
At the Barbershop.
Yeah, that was one fundraiser.
Hokum Blues.
Yeah.
So how did Hokum Blues come about? How did you, that's sort of what you do now. You play around a lot of places. What would you call that? And
I started going to open mics, and there was one that I would frequent regularly up there by American University in a club called Grant's Tomb. And it was like, who's buried in Grant's Tomb? And they would have a regular open mic, and some interesting hosts would be there. Mary Chapin Carpenter was one of the hosts. I ran that open mic, and I got, I would go up there regularly, and we would close that place up. And so I was there one night, and I was just playing my solo stuff like I do, some of the songs that I had learned. And Neil Harp comes in, and he's doing the same sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going, oh, man. Then come to find out that Neil had released an album already on vinyl. And found out that, here, this guy, he can really play, you know?
Yeah.
And so, we started talking, we exchanged phone numbers, and come to find out that not only was he a hell of a guitar player, but he was really a good artist.
Yeah.
And, he had this whole focus on, the Chesapeake Bay, and he did like lighthouses and skipjacks and the whole thing. And, and I'm thinking, yeah, this really is an interesting thing, because we're trying to do the same sort of thing, with me learning the country style blues and the parts of Virginia and stuff that these guys were from, that John Jackson from Tappahannock and Archie from down in Franklin County, and here's Neil representing the Chesapeake Bay area. It was like, man, I think we got something that we can do here. And, both involved with the DC Blues Society, and, he had known Archie also. And so we started, I had a pretty good collection of stuff already. And we started looking into some of the songs that guys like Bo Carter was doing, some of the double entendre songs, some of the Tampa Red stuff that he was doing, that they were doing, some of the Georgia Tom Dorsey was doing with Big Bill Brunzi before he became a preacher. And so we found out that not very many people were doing those kind of songs. They were doing more of the traditional, some of the old traditional blues songs, some of the Muddy Waters, and some more mostly of the Chicago style sound. And at the time Cephas was doing the same sort of thing too. Him and Phil were doing some party songs also. But that's how it came about. We started, putting our thoughts together and listening to more different cats, Pink Anderson, guys like that. Some of those guys that had been rediscovered, Mississippi John Hurt in particular. Neil knew some of the guys that went to Mississippi to find him. And some Maryland guys. That's a whole nother conversation. But, they ended up listening to one of his songs. Supposedly, the story I heard, that they listened to a song called Avalon Blues.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, and they said, "Oh, let's go see Avalon, Mississippi." And they get to where it is on the modern day map that they were using at the time, and the guy says, "Oh, no, where you want to go is over here." I think I know who you're talking about, and he lives over here. And the story that I heard, same with Pink Anderson, is that both of these guys were reluctant to even talk to these young white guys that show up on their doorposts, when they haven't seen anybody white in their neighborhood for like years. But they convinced Mississippi John Hurt to come back to the area. And so he stayed with Archie for a while, my understanding is. Archie put him up for a long time. And it might have been some family connection as a result of that. But so, we had some pretty good role models as far as song selection and music and what we wanted to play. And so that's pretty much how it came about. We ended up with a song list, about over a dozen songs, and we're thinking about what we can do to get this music out. And at the time, it was cassettes. Cassette tapes were the big item. And I'm not sure how we ended up meeting Tom Minty, but Tom Minty had a recording studio at the time, and he still does, that was able to record us, the three of us, on our first CD, Hokum Blues.
I have it.
And on cassette?
Not on cassette. No, I don't have it on cassette.
We came out on cassette originally. And we did pretty much our own marketing. Neil got a local artist that really liked our music that lived in Annapolis to do the cover art for the CD, and I think he did the artwork on the sleeve, which we later transferred onto the CD once we reproduced it once CDs became available, and Tom Minty switched over off of cassettes to CDs. Then that was our first CD reproduction.
Well, I love the style of music. I've told you. I mean, you had that long gig at Cassatt's, regular gig, and just that music. It's so singable. It's bouncy. It makes you feel good. I mean, it really is. I'm so glad that you do what you do. But let me ask a little bit about the barbershop community. I in these podcasts I asked about what have you seen of the power of music in your own life or in the lives of others, and maybe you could just reflect on what music has meant for you in general, but also in particular the barbershop and the connection that you've made with so many people there, and that really still continues.
The barbershop community is an opportunity, I think, for people to get together under one room, one space, and not so much have conversations, but to play music and listen. The space there is a lot different than when I started going there, the barbershop, because the whole focus is different. It's not, it's not the safe space that the African American community needed for groups of Black people to gather without being harassed. That whole aspect of the community is gone, in my opinion.
It seems like maybe there aren't as many folks interested in the style of music.
Yeah, it could be that the style of music has changed a little bit. It's not primarily Piedmont blues or fingerpicking blues. I've gone to see, there's people, mandolin players, which is not a problem to me. I don't mind any of those instruments. Horns. I've seen ukuleles in there.
Yeah.
I've seen piano, which is never a problem. Archie had a piano in the barbershop. So the community aspect of it I like. I see what they're doing and what they're trying to do to carry on that tradition. I right now prefer to get my music out to more people, and especially the younger kids, little kids, starting with toddlers and going up to the old ladies, the old folks, all of them. And I feel that I'm better equipped to do that in venues outside the barbershop. The barbershop gave me a fond appreciation of people celebrating and having and being relaxed and trying to make their day. People work hard all week, and I found that I'm able to do that by going to farmers markets, and especially in neighborhoods where there are kids, and seeing the joy on their faces puts a big smile on my face too. When some little kid for the first time in their lives gives you 5, or they start clapping and yelling out, "Yay!"
Sweet.
It's it really makes my day and puts a big smile on my face. And in some of these farmers markets, there might be 1,000 people come through.
Wow.
And it's an opportunity for me to, to take a look, because I'm always looking to see what kind of reactions they are, to see if they're listening to the lyrics that I'm singing.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people get it, and a lot of people end up really smiling as a result of it and not frowning. They come into the market frowning, and then by the time they walked around a little bit, there's a smile on their face. So that is my barbershop space.
Mm-hmm.
And right now.
Well, you've really been putting it out there for a long time. What you just said was very, very touching, and I know that you what you're saying is music makes a difference in people's lives.
Yes, absolutely does. There's no doubt about it. And
that you can help do that.
Yep. Like I say, music soothes the savage baby.
Rick, it's so great. Anything else you want to add about anything around about the barbershop, about your playing, things that you think people should be doing more of or less of, or anything like that around music? Any other thoughts?
I think that if you feel it, you should, don't hide it.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen, like I said, little toddlers that can only take one or two steps and they're bouncing up and down to the music. I've seen elderly folks with walkers and canes, and they're dancing with their walkers and their canes. And it's like, yeah, you get it. Relax, take it easy, take your mind off of other things, and let's focus on this. Focus on my beat. Focus on what I'm telling you.
That's awesome. Well, Rick, the world's a better place for you. I'm glad to call you a friend, and always look forward to hearing you play. Thanks so much for taking the time this afternoon, and we'll just keep on doing it.
Well, you're welcome, Jeff, and thank you also for persevering and trying to make this podcast happen. I mean, we've been going at it for almost 2 years, I think.
It's been a while, but it's a perfect day to do it. Glad we're, this will be coming out just before the 20th anniversary of the Archie Edwards Blues Heritage Foundation, and we both had roles. A lot of people had roles in making that happen, and
And I'm thankful that it's still happening. It's a great environment. People can learn a lot from the environment, from just playing music, jamming skills, how to jam, how to solo. So there is still a lot of things that people can learn from the barbershop and the community. The number of different performers that they bring in over the years has been pretty amazing. There's been some pretty amazing concert series there. And the space, believe it or not, kind of looks like Archie's old barbershop. Yeah. So, with the ceiling tiles and everything. Yeah. And that's, it is a space representative of the old barbershop. And that is worth it on itself. I mean, to the deer antlers hanging over the window. That's all Archie.
Yeah. It's amazing community, amazing place. All right. Thanks very much, Rick. Really appreciate your taking the time.
You're welcome, and thank you also.
You've been listening to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society. We talk with musicians and others about the power of music and how we can use music to help create a better world. Please check out our website, www.planetarygigs.org, for information about some of the organizations promoting music and musicians, resources about the power of music, books, movies, articles, including new research on music and the brain. We welcome your support. Planetary Gig Society is a Section 501c3 charitable organization, and you can donate on the website. You also can receive a free email signature block demonstrating your support for Planetary Gig Society. Please follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Planetary Gigs. And we want to thank fabulous musician and teacher Eric Weinberg of Little Eric Studios for the Planetary Gig Talk music titled Chill Kid, It's Saul. So please check out Planetary Gig Talk on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Subscribe and hear all the upcoming episodes. Thanks very much.